Thank you, Mr. Jensen, and good day to all of you. I'm going to begin right off with my title because it needs some explanation. The title is The Rectification of Names. The Rectification of Names. What does this mean? Well, this concept of the rectification of names goes back to a Chinese philosopher I'm sure you've all heard of, who was named Confucius. You may also know him as the guy who writes all the fortune cookies. Confucius is believed to have lived around 500 years before Christ, and his teachings have had a profound and lasting effect on Chinese culture up to the present day. Many of his supposed sayings were written down sometime after he lived in a work called the Analects, or the Sayings of Confucius. And it's here where the concept of the rectification of names is discussed. The story goes that Confucius was asked what would be the first thing he would do if he were made the governor of his region. What would be the very first thing he would do as the ruler? Confucius responded that it would be necessary, first and foremost, to rectify the names. Now, what did he mean by that? Well, he goes on to explain why this is necessary. He says, according to this translation, if names are not correct, language is not in accordance with the truth of things. If language is not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success. When affairs cannot be carried on to success, proprieties and music do not flourish. When proprieties and music do not flourish, punishments will not be properly awarded. When punishments are not properly awarded, the people do not know how to move hand or foot. Therefore, a superior man considers it necessary that the names he uses may be spoken appropriately, and also that what he speaks may be carried out appropriately. What the superior man requires is just that in his words there may be nothing incorrect. So to summarize that, he says that names have to be correct so that language can be in accordance with truth. Or to put it another way, words have to correspond to reality. If this is not the case, then society cannot function and will ultimately self-destruct. And so the most important thing is for names to be rectified, to match reality. Now, I'm not advocating Confucianism, but with respect to this particular observation, I think he was correct. Confucius recognized the problem with calling things by the wrong names and its destructive effect on society. But the Bible also recognizes the same problem. Turn to Isaiah chapter 5, verses 20 to 23. Here we find God's condemnation of a variety of problematic behaviors. And in this particular passage, God condemns those who pervert language by calling things by the wrong names. He says in Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight." It often seems like those who claim to be the smartest among us are also the worst offenders when it comes to their words not matching reality. It continues, "Woe to men mighty at drinking wine. Woe to men valiant for mixing intoxicating drink, who justify the wicked for a bribe and take away justice from the righteous man. God condemns those who call things by the wrong names, who call good evil and evil good, and so on. But he also implies that this leads to injustice. The righteous are condemned, and the wicked are justified. Confucius said the same thing. He said, if the names are not right, then punishments will not be properly awarded, and the people won't know how to move hand or foot because society is turned on its head. I think it's obvious that our own society has a problem with calling things by the wrong names. The most blatant example today comes from the ideology of transgenderism. Men are called women, and women are called men. And they don't just call things by the wrong names. They demand that you call things by the wrong names. You must call a he a she, and a she a he, or a z, or a zer, or a zit, or whatever name they come up with. But that's not all. They inject young people with unnatural levels of hormones and amputate otherwise physically healthy body parts, transforming them into medical patients for life, and they call it healthcare. They also say that abortion, interfering with the natural process of pregnancy and killing a human being, is healthcare. They redefined marriage to be something that isn't marriage. They redefined love to mean something that isn't love. Speaking the truth is called hate. And there are countless other instances where they've separated words from reality. On the other hand, if you oppose any of these things, they have plenty of names that they are willing to call you. Nazi, fascist, white supremacist, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, transphobe, Islamophobe, bigot, and the list seems to get longer every day. And no one who opposes them is immune. There was a man named Larry Elder who ran for the governor of California about a year ago as a conservative. And they called him a white supremacist, which is odd because Larry Elder is black. But they called him the black face of white supremacy. If you oppose them, it doesn't matter who you are, or even if it makes sense, they'll call you names. If you're black and you oppose them, they'll call you a white supremacist. If you're a Jew, they'll call you an anti-Semite. If you're a woman, they'll call you a misogynist, a woman hater. You've heard of fake news? Well, these are fake names. Names which have no relationship to reality, but only exist to demonize you. But it's nothing new. Christ was called fake names by his adversaries. He was called a glutton, a drunkard, demon-possessed, a blasphemer, a friend of sinners, and a lawbreaker. Today, they use different names, but it's the same playbook. But Christ didn't cower or apologize when he was called absurd names. He just exposed their absurdity and moved on. He didn't let it bother him. And we should follow that same example. Our society loves to use fake names, names that don't correspond to reality. On the other hand, God always uses words in accordance with truth. And one of the things that God must do when his government is established is to make language correspond to the truth. Turn to Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 9 through 13. This passage is a prophecy about what God is going to do to ensure that peoples of all nations can worship him in truth. He has to fix the problem that results from the languages of the world being corrupted. He says in Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9, "For then I will restore to the peoples a pure language, that they all may call on the name of the Lord, to serve him with one accord." He goes on to say that their sins will be forgiven and the proud and boastful will be replaced by meek and humble people. Then in verse 13, he says, "The remnant of Israel shall do no unrighteousness and speak no lies, nor shall a deceitful tongue be found in their mouth. For they shall feed their flocks and lie down, and no one shall make them afraid." Notice how speaking truthfully is associated with a pure language and even with righteous behavior. It all starts with using words correctly. So one of the most important things that God is going to do when he establishes his government is rectify the names. He's going to purify the language so that the words match reality. Because you have to make words right before you can make actions right. That also suggests that our own names will have to be changed, because the current names are not part of a pure language. But as it turns out, God likes to give people names that describe who they really are. There are several instances of God naming people in the Bible. For example, God called Abraham, which means father of a multitude, because that's what Abraham would become. He called his wife Sarai Sarah, which means princess. He changed Jacob's name to Israel, which can mean he struggles with God or he rules with God, both of which were applicable to the man as well as the nation of Israel. He called Solomon Jedediah, which means beloved by Jehovah, because it says that God loved him. And he named his own son Jesus, which means Jehovah is salvation. And it's likely he'll give all of us new names as well. Turn to Isaiah chapter 62. Here we find another prophecy which involves God giving names, in this case on behalf of his people, those of Zion and Jerusalem. He says in Isaiah chapter 62, verse 1, "For Zion's sake I will not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her salvation as a lamp that burns. The Gentiles shall see your righteousness, and all kings your glory. You shall be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord will name. You shall also be a crown of glory in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no longer be termed forsaken, nor shall your land any more be termed desolate. But you shall be called Hephzibah, which means my delight is in her. And your land, Beulah, which means married, which he then explains, for the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a virgin, so shall your sons marry you. And the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you." So God will give them a name that reflects their true status and identity. Down in verse 11, he concludes, "Indeed, the Lord has proclaimed to the end of the world. Say to the daughter of Zion, surely your salvation is coming. Behold, his reward is with him and his work before him. And they shall call them the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord. And you shall be called sought out, a city not forsaken." When God establishes his government on earth, he's going to rectify the names. He's going to make words and names match reality. Imagine what a difference it will make when words always correspond with truth. Nowadays, honest discussions are becoming more and more difficult because people increasingly use the same words to mean completely different things. It's as though we're speaking different languages, even though we're using the same words. But when the names are rectified, all this confusion and dishonesty will be removed. And whatever name each thing is given will accurately describe what it is. So let's start right now by being clear and correct in our own use of language, ensuring that we always speak in accordance with truth, as we at the same time look forward to that future when God's rule of truth will govern all words and actions on the entire earth.